Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my latest live stream. My name's Simon Whiteley, and today we're going to talk about stamp-based safety assessments in the context of a space example, the Boeing Starliner propulsion system anomalies. So welcome. Please comment below. Let me know you can hear me. Give me some feedback so that I know it is working. You know, this live streaming business is not quite as reliable and systematic as I would prefer, but you know, this is where we are. So please comment below, let me know where you're watching from. And of course, if you've got any particular questions or comments, or you want to share some of your experience, you're welcome to do that. You know, stick that in the chat and I'll get to it as we're moving along. So fantastic to have you here. Right, let's get the slides on. Look at that, fantastic. Excuse me. So before I get started, if you are interested in learning about or applying stamp and you need some help or you want to ask some questions, please visit my website, whiteley-safety.co.uk, and press this little green button down here on the first page. I need help now. Stick your details in there, fill out a message, send me a message, and we'll set up a call and answer any questions you've got. Now, this particular live stream, this is live stream number 18, would you believe it? So I've done over 30 hours now going through this 311-page report. But the purpose of this is not only just to sort of create some content and show you what STAMP, STPA and CAST is all about, but also to prepare to do a live workshop together. So if you visit my website, you can click on this button here. This is essentially a waiting list. So what I intend to do is once I've finished going through the investigation report, I will put together some slides, put together a presentation, and then I'll send out an email to people who join this waiting list to attend a free live workshop on Zoom where we'll get together, people from around the world, we'll discuss this topic. So the Boeing Starliner case study, talk about space engineering particularly, and then of course the application of STAMP, STPA and CAST. And this is your opportunity to come on here live with me and talk through any questions that you've got amongst a like-minded community of people. So it should be really cool, and it is a free event, it's a complimentary event, because my sort of personal mission is to share the experience so that other people will have a go with STPA and CAST, and you know, with the view to make systems safer and prevent serious incidents or accidents such as this one. So that's what it's all about. So visit my website, click the link in the comments. Okay, so where we got up to last time, essentially we got to halfway through section 5.2.1, which is about observations and recommendations in the context of culture and decision-making process during the investigation, during the mission, should I say. And we got through halfway through process and communication last time. So my intention today is to continue this process. We've got a number of pages to get through. Pardon me, I'm going to go for about an hour, 90 minutes, something like that, see how far we get. Because, of course, I've also scheduled some live streams for tomorrow and I think Friday as well. So there's plenty of time to keep going with this. So with that said, let's jump right into it. So let's zoom out and go back to where we were working. So we were here. That's where we got up to, isn't it? Recommendation 20. Yeah, did we talk about recommendation 20? Yes, we did. So then we went on to recommendation 21. Okay, so I'll just move my jigsaw piece over there. This jigsaw piece is so sort of small and elegant, but very, very useful. I had a conversation with some clients yesterday about this particular, about the concept of a control structure and particularly this jigsaw piece. And within a few minutes of talking about this, they were using this language and were able to ask some interesting questions about the actual investigation that they're performing. So it's a really powerful it looks really simple, but it is a really powerful tool when you get it into your hands and start using it regularly. Okay, so the crew commercial program establish a clear process for integrating technical expertise from different teams and organizations within NASA, ensuring that all relevant perspectives are considered to enable the what's the NOM? That was a NASA manager, wasn't it? NOM. There we go. NASA Operations Manager. So let's just drag that acronym over there so we don't forget. And the SMMT, I think that was the Starliner. Yeah, there it is, Mission Management Team. So they're two important stakeholders in this control structure model that we're looking at. So ensuring that all relevant perspectives are considered to enable the NASA Operations Manager to provide the NASA voice at the Starliner Mission Management Team. Okay, the importance of roles, responsibilities and authority path should be reiterated to technical organisations, along with the importance of cross-discipline integration and authority delegation. Now, it's interesting that roles, responsibilities and authority path, interestingly enough, that sounds just like what we were discussing the other day with regards to this. So this is a slide from my foundation training. And essentially what I'm highlighting here is that when we're talking about talking about a controller in a control structure, they have roles and responsibilities. Whether they're made explicit to the controller or not is another conversation. But their location, their position in the hierarchy implies certain roles and responsibilities and accountability. Now, of course, when we're talking about this bit here, it's emphasizing the importance of roles and responsibilities and the authority path. And I'm interpreting the authority path as essentially referring to the type of control actions that this controller can provide and how they flow down the rest of the propagate through the rest of the control structure. And of course, there are some sort of sideways interactions as well with other controllers that have similar sort of levels of authority, but may not have or may have overlapping or gaps with their responsibilities and this controller. And of course, that authority pathway, so to speak, also implies certain, it implies certain aspects of feedback that need to be considered. Because of course, a controller cannot logically fulfill its roles, responsibilities and accountability and wield its authority if it's not able to provide, or it provides inadequate control actions. And one of the reasons it might do that is because it's not getting adequate feedback from the control structure and the various levels and controllers below. So just be mindful of that. Okay, so process should ensure that all associated technical work is coordinated through the delegated technical team. There you go. There's a word there, coordination. We talk about that a lot in STAMP. Through the delegated technical team, and that parallel efforts are not spawned without careful consideration. So yeah, I mean, that's, both that wastes valuable energy, blood, sweat, toilet, tears and resources and time, but also it can cause potential unnecessary conflicts. But of course, parallel efforts may be necessary for certain things, certain decisions, certain integrity requirements. Anomaly process timeline and scheduling should accommodate coordination and adjudication of technical positions with respective organisation as time allows. This is one of the topics I was discussing with one of my clients yesterday, actually. How important an accident or incident timeline is to the sort of flow of the analysis, the flow of the investigation. Because, of course, when you're trying to figure out what's gone wrong or what's gone right that's led to a loss, you need to be able to collect that time-related event sequence-related information and arrange it in a timeline so that you as the analyst and the investigator can coordinate with your team and understand what went on. But of course, the more complex your investigation is, the more complex your control structure is, the more information you're going to need to collect and manage as part of a timeline. So it's important just to, appreciate that it can turn into a bit of a big, effort. And you've got to manage that really, really carefully. Try not to overdo it, but likewise, don't underestimate the level of effort involved, if that makes sense. So process should require separate but functionally aligned organizations to integrate across respective elements and provide integrated input as time allows at each respective level of the anomaly resolution team hierarchy. There we go, there's the word hierarchy, hierarchical control structure, culminating at the MMT or the PCB. So MMT, that was one of those terms that we couldn't find last week, the other day, wasn't it? That's right. Mission management team. So they're using two acronyms to mean two different things. That's really helpful. Thanks for that. Oh dear. Starliner mission management team. There we go. Fantastic. Okay, so this recommendation here, that could be enhanced by saying, hey, let's use STPA to develop a control structure model that supports the anomaly process investigation and resolution process. Too many words of process there, but the anomaly resolution process, so to speak, and what that control structure should look like. Who are the stakeholders that need to be involved? What are their roles and responsibilities and authority, accountabilities? How do they interact? How do they make decisions? What beliefs do they need to have to be able to support those decisions? And by extension, what feedback do they need, in what order, what sequence, priority, to be able to make appropriate decisions within an appropriate time frame? So you could use STPA to help solve this recommendation. And like I've said before, the offer of help is there. If you need me to get on a plane in the middle of the night and come and help organise or facilitate this, then the offer is there. Please just send me a message via my website or send me a message on LinkedIn. Fantastic. So Boeing create an equivalent MMI position. So what was MMI again? MMI. Come on, what was it? CCP. Oh, this is the word. This was not defined, was it? That's right. This term was not defined. So what is MMI? Did we? I don't think we did answer that the other day, did we? No, we didn't. What is an MMI? We don't know. We don't know. So it would help. It would help to know that. That'd be cool. Question mark MMI. It's not multimedia interface, like in the Audi. Audi multimedia interface. Question mark, question mark, question mark. So the interesting thing about this recommendation is it's telling Boeing in their control structure they need to create an equivalent controller called the MMI. So what are the roles and responsibilities of the Boeing MMI, and how does that coordinate, overlap, or have gaps with the equivalent MMI on the NASA side? Because again, you could have conflicting control actions or inadequate sharing of beliefs between those two controllers. So we need to make sure that they're coordinated and set appropriate constraints on that. Recommendation number 23, document expectations or provide training that NASA interfaces to contractors be very clear whether they are speaking with the full authority of their organization, NASA, or are info gathering, collaborating, sharing personal views. Now, this is really interesting because you could use a stamp control structure model as a diagram and put that in a document or put it in a short training presentation to say, hey, look, everybody on the program project, this is what the control structure is for design, development, testing, operations, and emergency response, anomaly resolution. these are what the stakeholders are, these are the stakeholder responsibilities, and when you're interfacing with this particular set of stakeholders, you yourself as an individual or a team member, you are either acting with the full authority of that organisation, or your role, responsibility, accountability is for information gathering, collaborating, sharing personal views. And that picture and a short textual description would solve that particular recommendation. I'm not saying there's not a load of work. There is some work to do to create that, but it's relatively straightforward. Recommendation number 24: define the process and rules of engagement for how. What's NESC? Is it NASA Engineering Safety Center? It is, isn't it? Yes, it is. There we go. Let's see. I'm getting good at these acronyms now, everybody. It's only taken 30 odd hours. I'm getting old. That's what it is, and it's hot. I've had COVID again. Right. Yeah. So define the process and rules of engagement for how NESC, NASA Engineering Safety Center, participates in the in-flight anomaly resolution process. Okay, there we go. So you will have or should have a control structure model for that process and who or what is involved and how that control structure interacts with the operational and engineering development and test control structure, if appropriate. Provide information to commercial contract partners about the NESC and rules of engagement before, during, and after a mission. Again, I'd kind of anticipate that logically, I'd like to think that's something that's already happened or should have already happened. And if it hasn't, why has it not happened? It's a bit late at this point to be defining that stuff and communicating it. But again, if it's not happened, it needs to happen. Okay, number 25, communicate all updates via mandatory training for programs and stakeholders. Right, so this one is really interesting because this function here of, I'm clicking on the wrong screen, there we go, communicate all updates. So this is essentially a broadcast from a higher level in the control structure downwards to others. And you could say, well, you could ask, well, Simon, hang on, when you say broadcasts or when you say communications, is that a control action or is that feedback? And I suppose it depends on well, there's a number of contexts that depends on. So typically when we're building a control structure model and thinking about the interactions between the different stakeholders, the different controllers, the different layers in the hierarchy, there's roughly three types, very, very broadly. There are control actions, and they are intended by the controller to have some impact on the layers in the hierarchy below. So the controller that provides those control actions, there is an expectation, and that might be implicit, not explicit, that the stakeholder that receives that control action actually does something with it. They don't just say, oh, well, thanks for that, and then ignore it. Then there is feedback or information. So this is providing information to others that will update their process models, their mental models, their beliefs, which may have an impact upon their decision making or should have an impact on their decision making. And then there's just generally information flowing around the control structure, just a sort of a generic interaction that's kind of, it's information and people may or may not act on it. Maybe maybe somebody sends an email with lots of information in it or records a video brief for everybody and everyone's too busy to watch it. That might, you might consider that type of interaction as just information only. But if there's information in there that is intended to, whether that's explicit or not, whether it's intended to change the beliefs or behaviors or control actions of the other controllers in the control structure, then it should be, emphasized by the, organization, the controller providing that information, that it is supposed to impact people and they should draw attention to it to make sure that those other controllers are actually paying attention to that information. Even if it's just sort of general information like dates moving and things like that, if it is important and has potential implications, then of course it should be emphasized. So corporate communications, like if I just quickly jump up here, this line here about safety information system, that could just be somebody sending an email to say, hey, here's a template on how to run your safety meetings or how to run the anomaly resolution process meetings. Now, it might just seem to be information, but it, has potentially deeper implications. So we just have to have a think about that and make a judgment. Okay, so is mandatory training for programs and stakeholders, is that the best vehicle to do it? Mandatory training. Is a training the right way to do it? Or could an asynchronous, a quick WhatsApp video, a Loom video, or a quick voice note or some text that can be read at double speed, whatever, would that be better, especially when you're communicating to so many stakeholders at once? So I don't know. I mean, it sounds like that's a good idea, but when you're in a high stakes, high stress program where everybody's got lots and lots to do, this kind of stuff's just going to be put at the bottom of the pile from a priority perspective. So yeah, I mean, communicate all updates is the primary recommendation. The question is, well, what updates are we actually talking about? Is there a prioritization on what those updates are? And then the vehicle for actually doing it is mandatory training the right way to do it. Maybe for some things, maybe not for all. Yeah, okay. I've talked about that to death. Oh, also, when you're thinking about this stuff, you need to think about the life cycle of the audience. So is it some new people that are completely fresh to the program, fresh to space, fresh to engineering, whatever it is? They need more steps to climb the ladder to get to a level of understanding and knowledge. Whereas people who have been on the program forever, they don't necessarily need to know all of that stuff. They need to know a little bit. And so the controller, and I'm specifically pointing to that, the controller that is in charge of all of this safety information related stuff, providing, communicating updates, it shouldn't just be left to the intern or the graduate to send emails to everybody in the program for them to be ignored. That is absolutely not what this should be. The messages that are sent should be appropriate for those different elements in the control structure. So it makes their job easier. They're not overwhelmed with information that's mandatory that they then have to ignore, because they're too busy or whatever it is. It should be respectful and appropriate. And I can't overemphasize that, because if that communication is not done appropriately, you could end up driving other negative behaviors and culture in the organization, such as not reading and responding to emails or ignoring emails. I mean, if you've ever experienced the introduction of Agile into a complex program and the use of certain tools that shall not be named that just end up generating billions of emails, you're just stressing your staff out and making them not want to open their inbox. And the same goes with tools like, I won't name a particular one, but when somebody sends an instant message and you get, notifications galore, it just puts people off. It destroys their focus and it destroys their enjoyment of work and all the other reasons. So that recommendation 25 has to be really carefully implemented in the program. It's not just giving it to a graduate to send emails to everybody and creating endless slide packs that nobody reads and get out of date and out of sync. Anyway, I've done that to death. Right, let's talk about recommendation 20. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Stick in the chat. Tell me what you think about that. For me, it looks like a really sort of easy recommendation, but the actual implementation of it has to be appropriate and respectful. It's not just sending emails on a Friday with a slide pack nobody reads attached to it. I mean, you could do that, but you're undermining safety and safety culture if you do that. Fantastic. Right, let's just have a quick sip and see if people are commenting. Well, it seems to be working, so that's good. Right, recommendation 26. Crew commercial program, incorporate structured pre-mission training, including dedicated briefings, tabletop exercises, and integrated team simulations to rehearse real-time decision-making processes. I think that is a fantastic recommendation. And STP, well, STAMP can be used to help design that training and design those simulations and also assess them. So assess whether they've been effective or not, and provide appropriate feedback. Yeah, I mean that's a project in its own right. And the work I did partnered with Professor Riccardo Patriarca from the University of Rome Sapienza in support of the European Space Agency. We were able to start looking at what are the type of requirements for ground control, from a control of the spacecraft perspective. What type of feedback might ground control need? What kind of decisions might they need to make, and what type of timescales are they dealing with? And then, of course, by extension, what is the control structure? What does the control structure look like? What should it look like? What equipment and communication should be made available to them? And also, what information should be made available to them? What access to subject matter experts do they need? And of course, by building a control structure model and start asking those kind of questions, you can anticipate, very, very far in advance of the actual mission, what that needs to look like and how that needs to be put together, and specifically what things they need to practice. What do they need to, what do they need to train? What decision making processes are they going to have to execute? So it can be used to help with that, and we did discuss that quite a lot, and I'm hoping that'll come out in public information, public presentations in the future. Okay, so prior to launch, convene multi-level NASA Boeing teams for a series of targeted briefings and tabletop exercises that walk through anomaly resolution process. Yes. So wouldn't it be helpful if you already had a control structure model of the anomaly resolution process and the organizations and stakeholders involved, such that when you give those targeted briefings, you can show them it and then say, hey, you're this stakeholder and you are in this part of the control structure. These are your roles and responsibilities. These are the decisions that you are likely to make during normal, abnormal, and emergency conditions, and then in the context of an anomaly resolution process. These are the types of information that you're going to need to have access to. And if you prepare in a lot of detail, maybe you could give them access to the information pack or some kind of document that has an index of all the information and processes and everything else that they need, so they don't have to create it themselves and spend that valuable time when there's a real anomaly to deal with. These sessions should focus on reinforcing expectations around conflict resolution, escalation through technical and management forums, communication standards, and data dissemination practices. Engagement should include all decision-making tiers from working level technical teams to senior management. So that is from the bottom of the control structure to the top. Building on current practices, existing MISAP tabletops and large-scale simulations should be redesigned. That's interesting. To go beyond jurisdictional awareness or nominal big event rehearsals. Yeah, I think that's a good recommendation, that. Sounds good. Future exercises should specifically stress test integrated anomaly resolution under realistic, time-critical conditions and include both leadership and technical participants across NASA and Boeing. To ensure readiness, attendance at these simulations should be mandatory for leadership and key decision makers from both organisations, avoiding gaps where either NASA or Boeing is absent from critical rehearsal opportunities. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. But again, is the organisation, are the stakeholders actually resourced to be able to do that? It's all right saying do all of these things, but they need, they already needed more resource based on what was said previously in the report. So what other resources are going to be made available to do this? Because again, this should not, become a distraction from the mission work that they need to do. This is in addition, so they need to make sure they have adequate people and resources to do this. Otherwise, it's just going to burn everyone out, and it's not going to be done to an appropriate level of quality. These sessions should explicitly address cultural alignment, including open data sharing, engagement of technical authorities and subject matter experts, NASA provider decision sequencing, and consensus building, so that expectations are clearly set before launch. Pre-mission planning should also include team building opportunities and kickoff sessions to align roles, goals, and expectations. I would go for even further than that, to be honest with you. Let's see if this pen works. There we go. The team building opportunities bit, and I'm going to bang on about this a little bit, so just bear with me. Typically, in my experience and some of the things I've seen over the years, team building opportunities are typically not, and I may sound really cynical, so please forgive me, but they're typically viewed as just a waste of time. And so to be able to get people to appreciate how important a proper facilitated team building opportunity is, that really needs to be taken seriously and done carefully and respectfully, so that it doesn't undermine or increase any kind of cynicism in the team. Because these team building opportunities are essentially, how can I put it? Their main reason for existing, though it's not said here, is to build trust amongst the team, amongst the team stakeholders, the members. And when I say trust, it's even more than that. Fundamentally, they have to know each other, get to know each other, maybe even like each other a little bit, but that's not necessarily mandatory. It'd be good if they did, so that they can build trust. And they go through the process of knowing, liking, and trusting each other. And of course, like it said earlier on in the report, there was one of the interviewees said that the experience had kind of galvanized that particular team so that they were able to work more effectively and trust each other. And that's what a team building opportunity is. I'm not suggesting you put them in a life and death situation so that they build, know, like, and trust. But it has to be done appropriately. It has to be taken seriously. It can't just be a la-di-da generic, let's have a team building opportunity and let's go build a raft and get wet. No, I mean, it needs to be done properly by professionals that do that sort of thing. Because it is very important that people build a trust amongst themselves. Because without that trust, performance, is not as good as it could be. And when the chips are really down, you need that extra performance, that trust. So yeah, good recommendation there. Let's just have a look. So that is, pre-mission training. So yeah, that's that recommendation. Right, let's look at recommendation 20. Actually, just before I continue on 27, 28, 29, I said this last session, but I just want to emphasize that these recommendations, at the moment, they sound like they're all good ideas and I support them. But what I'd also like to see in an investigation report, and you might have a view on this as well, but the recommendation should be closely related, to the investigation findings or observations. Because if you've observed something, and you've written it down in a report, it's kind of like, well, okay, so what? You've observed this thing, so what? What are we going to do about it? Do we need to do something about it? And what might that look like? What's the recommendation that sort of fits with it? So it would have been good if there were some links between these observations and the recommendations. And I would expect that some of those observations will drive more or different recommendations as listed here. And of course, these recommendations, they've originated from something or many things have happened that have driven these recommendations. So it would be good from an investigation report to know what that is, what that traceability is. And this is one of the benefits of STAMP and using STPA or CAST, because you can find those things either in the control structure, they're structural issues, or they're common issues across different parts of the structure, or they're to do with the controllers themselves and their behaviors, or they're to do with the interactions between stakeholders. So you can, be very specific what the issues are, what the observations are, what the contributing factors are, and then line them up and link them to the recommendations. So you've got complete traceability. Now, of course, if you're doing a very detailed analysis of a large control structure model, you're going to have a lot of these things potentially. So you're going to have to manage that information and that traceability. But it gives you real detailed insight that is auditable and traceable. And of course, if you want to use a heat map, take a picture of your control structure and show what open actions, open recommendations there are. Mark them off as red or blue or whatever, and then when they're complete, you can mark them off as green. If you want to do that, that's one way to do it. Okay, right. So number 27 then, recommendation 27. So provide regular training program, regular training for program management teams, direct reports, and stakeholder members regarding strategies for risk-based decision-making, including the use of 7 elements of flight rationale, risk scoring process, and cumulative risk balancing strategies to ensure the team members maintains a baseline understanding to prevent skewed understanding, even with changeover from team members. Yeah, this is really important. Include providers, include any differences for applying techniques pre-flight versus in-flight. Determine appropriate interval for refreshers, i.e. yearly, or before. I mean, this bit should be or before major milestones. Where's my... I'm using it upside down. There we go. Sorry. Major milestones. It's not as easy as writing on my iPad. There we go. Milestones. There we go. My handwriting's not normally this bad, honest. There we go. Implement start. Actually, just before I continue, when you're making these recommendations, have a think. What must the control structure look like for designing, implementing, and then confirming it's working properly? These recommendations. That's one of the things as part of a cast analysis. It's what is the implementation control structure for these recommendations? Who is responsible for their implementation? Who is responsible for making sure they meet the intent of these recommendations and that they are effective? Because it may be these recommendations, as suggested and implemented, they might not actually do what we intended and they might need to change. So we need to think about, well, what is the control structure that implements these things, and then make sure that they're actually effective. And if not, they take appropriate action to change. Okay, number 28. So implement start action for burden of proof. Provide guidance to program team on verification evaluations should be considered with a prove it safe mindset. So I think that's prove it safe versus prove it's unsafe mindset. I'm not pardon me, I'm not sure I understand this. We'll have to look at action 25. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put star action 25. And then we need to see where that is. I can't remember where it is. There we go. Let's put an arrow from there to there. Let's choose my favorite arrowhead. Right, star report 25. So this is in one of the appendices. I can't remember which one. Human factors. What's that one? Can't remember. Can't remember. Is that the star report? Is that the star report? Oh, there's the star report. Look, yeah. So it's in there somewhere. I'm sure I could find. It's quite large, actually, isn't it? Yeah, it'll be in there somewhere. We'll find it another day. Another stream, should I say? But yeah, I think focusing on prove it safe versus prove it's unsafe mindset. That's kind of a safety case mindset. We make a claim that it's safe, and then we argue, and then we argue why it's safe, and then provide evidence. And sometimes that's a good idea, but other times, it can be misused. It can turn into a bit of a let's have evidence that everything's fine, and any evidence, counter evidence that things are not fine, we'll kind of forget about those, or we'll underplay them or ignore them. I'm not saying that's what's happened here, but the safety case method and claim argument evidence and goal structuring notation, that can be misused, and I've seen it misused a lot of times over the years. And actually spending time doing that, I think, can actually time could be better spent doing actual safety engineering analysis and requirements engineering than trying to make an argument. But that's maybe that's a conversation for another day. But, what is the benefit of a safety case regime? I'm in both camps, shall we say, for and against. I'm in both camps. I've firmly got my feet in both camps, based on my experience. Okay, so recommendation number 29. For current and future programs, NASA should ensure that resources are sized to the oversight insight burden required to meet the risk acceptance posture the agency has chosen for that acquisition and number of providers in flow. This should be reassessed if additional providers are added. Depth of penetration into qualification test and analysis are a direct correlation to the risk assumption with a provider. Yep, great recommendation. However, this bit here. Depth of penetration into qualification test and analyses are a direct correlation to the risk assumption with a provider. I don't think that is necessarily appropriate, based on my experience in many large, complex, dangerous programs. And the reason I say that is because it's making a very subtle and implicit assumption that the organization, the control structure, and the stakeholders doing their work, whatever it is, following their processes, and the output that they create is actually to a good standard that follows the process. It's been reviewed and signed off appropriately. Actions have been tracked and closed off and progressed, and there isn't really much technical debt or safety case debt, so to speak. And my personal view is the level of penetration should be based on that type of feedback, not a risk assumption, not a risk assessment about severity and likelihood. I think that actually misleads the independent reviews. If obviously severity is important and likelihood and all that stuff is important, but I think the decision maker, if we have a controller about who's deciding, let me get my little jigsaw piece out for everybody. If we're having to think about, who is the independent reviewer, the authority, the oversight, the insight, if they are making decisions based on a risk assumption, that's only part of the picture, and I think that's a bit optimistic. That's what I'm trying to say. And so what I'm saying is their decision making should be based on other beliefs, other feedback about things like technical debt, or about open actions, or that actions are not being progressed, or that the staff turnover, safety engineer turnover, difficulty recruiting safety engineers, as an example. Another one is the time to do a review. If the review of a safety document is taking a lot of time because the quality of it is rubbish, then that should be a type of feedback that informs the reviewer decision maker, hey, perhaps we need to dig deeper here. And when I say dig deeper, there's two sides to that. If we think about the safety case, we can have product-based evidence or process-based evidence. And so when that independent reviewer oversight insight is working, they might want to, they might see feedback about documents, process evidence. The review's not very good. There's millions of open actions or millions of comments or whatever it is. That feedback should be going to the insight oversight, and then that should be helping inform their decision making about where they go and review. Is it that if you've got process-based evidence, you need to go and look at an organization and how they are performing a process, how they're resourcing a process, and then the product of that process? If the document's got a lot of review comments, a lot of open actions, It almost doesn't matter what those review comments are. If there's a lot of them, then that indicates that the product of that process is not very good, which indicates that the process that generates that product is not very, very effective. And of course, that means that there's something going on with the control structure. Now, of course, what I'm suggesting obviously implies a certain level of resource in the oversight and insight organisation, and the available and required feedback that they need to be able to make decisions, and of course, what level of authority and responsibilities and accountability they have to be able to go and dig in. Because you need process auditors, but you also need bloodhounds. You need people that can smell blood and go digging for it. And I'm very good at that. I'm actually too good at that. You might argue, being a bloodhound and finding things and finding bodies that are buried that people might not want to be found. I'm very good at that. So if you want a hand with independent technical evaluation and finding stuff, please get in touch. Okay, so I've talked about that to death. So yeah, I don't think risk assumption for decisions about depth of penetration into qualification test analysis is enough. I think that's not enough, and I hope the justification I've given to that opinion makes sense. I mean, give me some abuse in the comments. Let me know what you think, or if you don't want to do it in the comments, please send me a message via my website or via LinkedIn. Just send me a message and let me know what your thoughts are. Fantastic. Yeah, okay, let's keep going. So now we're going to talk about process data management. So we've done. Hang on. Yeah. Pardon me. Let's keep going. Process data management. Observation number 1. There was insufficient access to system design details as well as performance qualification and test data for in-flight anomaly resolution. So if we just have a little look at our jigsaw piece, we're talking about this here. There's inadequate feedback going to the decision maker, to the controller, the stakeholder. Interview data corroborated the lessons learned outlined in the STAR report, indicating difficulty in obtaining technical data, test data, access to subcontract experts, and data from Boeing team members. In large part influenced by the contract structure. So I talked about this at length last time and the time before. So Livestream number 16 and 17, I think. So that absolutely needs a recommendation to nail that down, and using a stamp control structure would help to solve that problem, or at least help people to understand the problem and see the problem explicitly so that they can come up with a way to overcome it. Because I don't think there is a one-size solution to that, because of course we're dealing with potentially security, ITAR information, security classifications, intellectual property, company secrets, all of that good stuff. So there will be some solutions to that, but it's how they implement it that matters. Between Boeing and its subcontractors, limiting direct access by NASA to both personnel and data. This issue, accessing data, existed well before the CFT mission and was magnified by the pressures resolving a major in-flight anomaly. NASA engineers often felt the contract structure caused Boeing and subcontractors to deliver the letter of the contract and hence restrict open and honest conversations. Yes, I've experienced that many times, and it's even harder when it's also across international boundaries and languages. So if you are interacting with stakeholders that English is not their first language, in this case, that can also make things difficult, especially when translations are needed, and especially when we're talking about complex technical systems and requirements and intent and functions and malfunctions, it can get very challenging to translate meaning between engineers of different languages and origins, and especially if the go-between is not a technical interpreter, or it's left up to the only one who has the English and other language experience. And sometimes that's not an engineer, so they interpret things and misunderstand things, and you end up going around in circles and spending valuable time trying to explain things that you really shouldn't need to. But anyway, so additionally, there was often noted an apparent reluctance on the part of Boeing or Boeing subcontractors to share information with the NASA team due to perceived contract obligations or data sharing agreements. This reluctance to share data made it very difficult to foster a sense of one team. So, you know what I was saying earlier on about know, like, and trust. If you have a contract obligations or data sharing agreements, which is preventing them from knowing, supporting each other and then building trust or undermines trust, of course, we shouldn't be surprised when there are issues. To address the challenging flight anomalies and increase mistrust, there we go, look, between NASA and Boeing. That is absolutely critical. It needs to be addressed. Boeing's relationship with subcontractors through contract arrangements did not provide for subcontractor real-time support during the CFT mission. I mean, that is absolutely unreal. That should be one of the basic contractual requirements. So it'd be interesting to know a bit more about that. Is it that it wasn't covered in the contract and they just said flat out, no, we're not supporting you? Or is it that the commercial agreements, commercial arrangements was, oh, it's too expensive? The subcontractor has said, yes, of course we'll support you during the CFT mission, but this is the fee. And a program manager, decision maker said, oh, well, that's just too expensive. We're not having that chop, and that decision fundamentally undermines the safety control structure. So is there a commercial pressure there that is undermining safety? And I probably bet 10 American pounds the answer is yes. So that needs to be addressed. The relationships with subcontractors through contract structure place detailed design and qualification data and knowledge with the subcontractor, such that the Boeing engineer knowledge was relegated to how the systems integrated with the Starliner vehicle. During the initial anomaly resolution process, several interviewees noted a lack of Boeing detailed knowledge of SMR service module reaction control system design, qualification and performance, made the anomaly resolution process inefficient, delayed decision making, and increased the sense of mistrust, which of course you'd expect. So yeah, I mean, just to put a fine point on it, if you had a control structure model for this contractual relationship and then expanded it and thought about, well, during design and development, we need a contractual relationship between NASA, Boeing, and the subcontractors that supports design development and test, and then the operational control structure, whether it's a flight test or an actual operational mission, and then of course emergency response, recovery, and anomaly resolution process. So that would have made those things explicit so that the contract should address each of those topics. And again, if you need help and support with a contract review, building a control structure model from that, spotting issues and making suggestions for changes to the contract arrangements, then I can do that. I can help with that. Just get in touch. Observation 2. NASA was overprotective of information and gate kept the information. An artifact of how InSight is set up and implemented between NASA and Boeing is that a few NASA employees are seen as gatekeepers of information, and that is provided by Boeing as part of a contractual insight. Right, okay, sorry. So Insight and then NASA and Boeing And then there are NASA employees that are gatekeepers of information that is provided by Boeing as part of contractual insight. This does not accommodate the need for data access required during a major anomaly resolution. I mean, this I've seen similar to this as well. I mean, you need some form of interface manager that manages the information, the interactions between the stakeholders, and make sure that that information is tracked, that the state of it, its release state, its whether it's draft or full, signed off, whether it's authorized, the reference lists, all of those things, the way that information is managed and controlled should be done by a centralized function. And they can be seen as gatekeepers in this context. But that means that those stakeholders, those controllers, those gatekeepers, if we take our little jigsaw piece again, let's say this controller is the gatekeeper and this is the information, and this controller receives requests from elsewhere, other controllers for information, then the decision making that they have and the beliefs that they have with regards to this information, if they're not releasing it, or it's difficult to get it, or they're not providing it, is that because they believe they're not supposed to provide it? Is it that they're following a process or their training that says only under these circumstances can you release this information? So they're doing their job properly, doing it very well actually, but it's actually undermining safety in operations and major anomaly resolution. So what recommendations do they need? I don't think it's you must give everybody the information when they request it, because it's sensitive information. So what recommendations do we need to make from a control structure perspective for the gatekeepers and then everyone that interacts with the gatekeepers, so that they understand when interacting with the information gatekeepers, this is what the gatekeeper is expecting, and this is what you must do to get access to your information. Because of course, this is also a security safety balance problem here. Because of course, you could always have some potential enemies or adversaries, hostiles, trying to steal information, and so how those gatekeepers act. They're not just trying to not undermine safety. They're also trying not to undermine security. So, that particular topic, maybe there's an opportunity there to do both STPA and STPA Sec, the cybersecurity version, where you think of both safety and security at the same time. So anyway, we'll move on after that. That's an important topic. Okay, so observation 3, stakeholders faced challenges accessing both archived and ongoing data. This is one of the banes of my existence. Microsoft SharePoint. Honestly, Microsoft, if you're listening, please make it better, because it's ridiculous. And it's not just SharePoint, it's a lot of other tools for managing information. The repositories. I mean, I've worked with some really good, I've worked with some better information management systems and some really shocking ones. And when you make it difficult for your engineers to access information rapidly, you're actually undermining their ability to do their job effectively. You're actually tying their legs together and making their job that much harder than it needs to be. So yeah, access control to information, it should be a couple of clicks. It shouldn't be going through lots of menus and elaborate training to understand how to use the damn tools. Anyway, I won't bag on about that too much. I've got a few scars on my back from dealing with stupid tools and accessing data, and the same data being in multiple places instead of controlled in one place. And again, that some people act like squirrels with nuts. So when they find a piece of information, because they can't trust the archive or the management system, they keep a copy of it local to them, so they know they've got a copy, and then it gets out of sync with the rest of the stuff going on. But sometimes it's really, really important to keep an archive of everything, even if it's just projects that have got to a certain point and then stopped or been aborted, that information might still be valuable. And an example I give is from back in 2009 when I was leading a team of subject matter experts to do an independent technical evaluation of the Royal Air Force Nimrod aircraft at the time. So there was two aircraft types, the MR2 and the R1, so the maritime reconnaissance and the reconnaissance spy plane. And this was in the aftermath of the XV-230 accident in Afghanistan, and whilst Sir Charles Haddon Cave QC was doing his government inquiry, the Nimrod review. So I was on the periphery of all of that. I could see inside everything that was going on, and was on the periphery of it. And one of the examples that one of my subject matter experts came up with is during the 1980s, funnily enough, just before the Falkland War, or just as it kicked off, which is topical with England versus Argentina later on tonight. Come on, England. They needed to stick air-to-air refueling on the Nimrod aircraft, on the MR2s. And so it was an urgent operational requirement, a modification. And they basically modified the aircraft very, very quickly. Now, of course, when you modify your aircraft very, very quickly, you're not necessarily following the full process in all of its glory, because that takes too long and they need to get this thing in the theatre and crack on. And so once you've done that rapid modification, in slow time, you still need to go back and document things and cross T's and dot I's and make sure everything is sorted out and document it. And in that case, because the way documentation was controlled, or whether it was created or not, we're not sure. We think it was, cleaning up after the modifications. But 20, 30 years later, when we were doing our investigation, we didn't have access to that archive information. We know that some of it was lost in one of the archive facilities. I think they had a fire or a flood, or they had a flood and then it had a fire, or it had a fire and a flood. I can't remember which way it was, but it was lost. And then there was other local data admin controls, where filing cabinets, physical copies of these important reports, test reports, all this other stuff, design information, were kept in locked filing cabinets. And for whatever reason, over time, the local office building manager was like, oh, we need to empty these rooms of all these unimportant filing cabinets with unimportant information in it. And one of the guys on my team was like, no, this information in this office, this archive, it's critical information that supports in-service aircraft, or aircraft that have been modified and changed over time. And from a safety case perspective, there is an implied requirement that you must keep hold of all of your information to do with your system until after it's been taken out of service and after it's been disposed of, because there's information in that, somewhere in that case, that could help or benefit safety, or even reuse in the future. It's like the service history on your car. When you come to sell it, if you don't keep a service history, the value of your car is less. Now imagine that you were supposed to do safety critical maintenance and you can't demonstrate whether it's been done or not. So keeping information, whilst that sounds like a boring topic, it is actually really critical to the safety case. And in fact, the safety assessment and the safety case should discuss how information is archived and managed, and the access and availability to it. So I've got on my high horse then, so I'm just going to climb down again. Okay, so it was difficult to access critical data in a timely manner. That is really bad. It needs to be nailed down and sorted out for next time, but I understand how challenging it is. There were multiple layers of difficulty for decisions makers to find the right data. Due to the difficulty, people tended to reach out to experts closer to the issue instead of digging through SharePoint lists. There we go, SharePoint, everybody. Ugh. SharePoint. Ugh. Anyway. SharePoint. That's the other thing I've noticed. I'm going to moan now, so just bear with me. That's the other thing I've noticed. When you do word searches or text searches, whether it's on Windows, whether it's in Outlook, whether it's on the internet, Google particularly now, they just don't seem to work anymore. Well, we seem to progress to a point in about the early 2010s where if you type some text in a box with some stars, it would literally find what you were looking for exactly. And then since then, the search function seems to have just, well, it doesn't find things that you know are there. What is it about the search function? Tell me in the comments. Have you had frustrations with search trying to find information? How did you sort it out? Did you just pay a graduate to have a big spreadsheet that tracks everything, and then that's the single point of truth? Or your own filing cabinet? Have you managed documents locally? I know I have for certain standards and regulations. I've kept a copy myself. But then if everybody in the team is doing that, you end up with a network drive with about 50 copies of whatever it is, because each individual doesn't trust that copy is going to remain accessible. Which actually, funnily enough, brings me on to this. So this is the Safety Review Process Standard, SSP 30599, which is on the ntrs.nasa.gov website. And I accessed this reference a couple of weeks ago. And then last week, Friday or whatever it was, I did the last live stream last week. I went to this website to see it again, and it said 404 not found. And I was like, what? Is the website broken? Has somebody hidden the document? Is it been inadvertently deleted? So even if it's on the internet, it doesn't necessarily mean your access is going to remain. So document management, information management is absolutely critical to safety and access to it as well. Somebody should be the information manager. Somebody should be responsible for making sure that stuff is available. Anyway, yeah, so we talked about that. Yeah, okay, so right. Observation 4. Throughout development and during flight, NASA engineering attempted to engage Boeing regarding problems NASA engineering attempted to engage Boeing regarding problems and items encountered by SpaceX, but were limited in discussions because of proprietary information concerns. Again, this is a leadership issue. If there are concerns about proprietary information, I totally get that, but everybody should be getting together and making sure that is not a hurdle to discussing important issues. That is a leadership issue. That they shouldn't be getting away with, we're not going to do anything because it's proprietary information concerns. That everyone needs to be brought to the table and thrash that out and sort it out. So there should be a recommendation for that somewhere. There should be a referee that gets people on the mat, gets them together. Okay, process data management recommendations. So number 33, that's behind my head. Let's just have a quick drink. Is anybody commenting to me? Come on, if you're watching this, wherever you're watching from, type in the comment. Let me know where you're watching from, and let me know what you're watching this on. Are you watching this on your works laptop or on your home TV screen or on your little iPhone or whatever? Or are you watching it on a games console? I'd love to know. Fantastic. Right, let's continue. So recommendation number 33. Oh, no, that's not supposed to happen. There we go. I can see it. There we go. So evaluate contract structures for services contracts to determine level of NASA insight oversight, expected overall participation in design decisions and reviews throughout the project lifecycle, and expected support for real-time operations and anomaly resolution. Right, so this is awesome. This should be a specific task or a project for using STPA. STPA would absolutely help supercharge this beyond doubt. Honestly, it would really help this recommendation if you used STPA. And like I said, if you need help, if you want somebody to do it, I could do it. Or if you want somebody to hold your hand, we could do it together. Done for you or done with you. Fantastic. And of course, if you want to do it yourself, that's fine. And I can review it and help provide critical friendly feedback. Right, require contract structures chosen for commercial services to have and determine NASA expectations for quick and ready access to subcontractor design experts at all stages of system design and especially to aid in efficient anomaly resolution. Evaluate contract services. So this is require, and then this is evaluate contract structures and shared accountability implementation with providers to determine what level of insight oversight NASA needs during the design phase, test flight phase, and into operational phases, and emergency response phases. So thinking about the future, and accident investigation phases. Ensure contract structure enables subcontractors to provide insight during missions for anomaly resolution, else accept the risk that the data is not accessible. So this recommendation here is literally, I think, do an STPA the contract structure and identify what the control structure looks like inside the contract structure. Make it explicit, see where the weaknesses are, and fill those weaknesses in. Number 31, ensure that future contracts include provisions for integrated anomaly resolution planning, including expectations for transparency and data sharing. Fantastic, love it. That's an easy one, that one. Establish a central repository of information, there we go, for use during missions to enable quick access to data critical to near real-time decision making and real-time decision making. Let's make it easy for everybody. Update repository using modern tools to improve searchability to quickly locate the data. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, Microsoft SharePoint is not really suitable for that kind of activity. It's basically just my favorite term. It's basically a landfill. And so, like, I've had it a few times where I've started a new project or been handed over a project, and they send you a link to SharePoint and then go, there you go, it's all in there, knock yourself out. And it's basically a digital landfill. You go in there, they're often not organized, in a line with config control of information principles, information management principles. You don't know what's what, you don't know what's where, you don't know whether it's the latest, you don't know how it all fits together, there's no referencing, it's just all mandrolic. We've got software systems today that should be able to tie all this together with one button press. You should be able to go through reference documents with one button press, not search for, dig it out, download it, load it, look at it, copy, control F, find and replace. It should be a lot easier than that. But this is a common issue all organisations have to deal with, especially complex organisations and projects like this one. Right, there we go. So let's get through number R33. So hang on, have we finished that one? Yeah, we have, yeah. R33, reevaluate a data sharing infrastructure with the stakeholder community. This should ensure a clear and efficient access to information during a mission, along with data sharing expectations and protocols across teams, along with decisions on which teams and roles need access to information. NASA needs a mechanism to enable sharing data across providers and programs in critical situations. Again, I'm kind of surprised that is a recommendation, because I would have liked to have thought that that's kind of normal business anyway. And it kind of worries me that it's not. So, there's a recommendation there to find out why the hell that is not already a common thing, and make sure it's common across all the NASA programs, all the stakeholders. And of course, if you're an organization that's not involved in this directly, you should have one of these as well anyway. It's kind of basic stuff. Assign a role that is responsible for ensuring communication information is coordinated, integrated across teams during missions. There you go. That's the gatekeeper I was talking about. They should be the coordinating controller in the structure. And anybody who's got any issues with information and currency and access to information should know to immediately go to that office, that stakeholder, that person. This is This is not rocket science. Anyway. Include a dedicated annual meeting, topic, or training about insight into provider information and where to find information. I would expect that that should be a quick and dirty Loom video or WhatsApp video, whatever it is, that's available to new starters and everybody so that they can get up to speed on that without having to all get together once a year. It should be periodical, on demand training so that they know what they're doing and where to go, and they know who to call and can know, like, and trust that gatekeeper to get access to information. I mean, I've worked in, when I won't say which organization, but one of the first engineering organizations I worked with, a very prestigious organization, they literally had an information office, and you could go in there during office hours, or there was a 24-hour hotline if necessary, but you could go in there, talk to one person, and they would know where everything was and they could help you finding it. You didn't have to find it yourself. You told them what you wanted, and they were experienced and trained and capable to go and find it. And I suppose if you think about the control structure, me as an engineer trying to solve a problem and trying to get information about it, I've no idea what the information architecture is and what the history is and where that stuff's going to be. I just have a particular problem I'm trying to understand and solve. So it's up to the, gatekeeper, the information gatekeeper, so to speak. It is their responsibility to know, what the information is, how it's organized, where to find it, how to access it, what the security aspects and implications are, and then coordinate with the requester to make sure that happens. I mean, in the example I gave, I'd go to the drawing, the drawing office, talk to one person. I'm looking for this particular part number or this particular chapter, shall we say, and they would go and request it, make a copy, and provide it. And it was very, very quick. It was fantastic, in fact. And that mean I didn't need to learn about how all the systems worked or where the information was. That knowledge and experience was in an expert, and I just had access to that expert. Anyway, let's keep going. All right, include a dedicated annual meeting, topic, or training. I think that should be on demand, I've just said. Let's just write on demand. Where's my... On demand, there we go. On demand video, screen capture, maybe. Let's not make it too manual. Asynchronous, on demand. About insight into provider information and where to find information. Ultimately, this is to ensure that a proper infrastructure and central repository is in place when responding to anomaly resolution process. It should be for the program. It shouldn't just be for anomaly resolution. I suppose the only difference in anomaly resolution, it should be very rapidly accessible. But then, wouldn't you want that for your program repository anyway? Because otherwise people are just wasting time. Because, I mean, this is a hot topic because on one of the most complex programs I've ever worked on, and if you know my background and have seen my CV, you'll probably know which one I'm talking about. But it was absolutely mind-blowing how complex the program was, how complex the information architecture was, how complex the safety case was, how complex the organization and different stakeholders and teams were. And they had a digital repository, which was one of the best ones better ones I've worked with. But it was still took a lot of time between first thinking, hey, I'm reading this topic and I need to answer a question. And my question will be answered, I believe, in this reference number. And the time it took between having that thought and then going to the reference number could be anywhere between 1 minute and 20 minutes. And of course, when you're trying to understand a complex system and a complex safety case with references to lots of different functional analyses and fault trees and failure conditions and hazards and requirements numbers and all of this other stuff, your brain is already at capacity just trying to understand the thing you're looking at. If you then add on the complexity of trying to find and locate and access information, it just burns people out. It's ridiculous. Should do a human factors analysis of that kind of work. Anyway, let's keep going. Right. Yeah, this central repository should be accessible to all stakeholders with need to know. It's not just need to know, it's also, from a security perspective, yes, they might need to know, but are they actually qualified and appropriately cleared to access that information? And like I said, there's a security safety balance here that has to be achieved. Requirement 34: establish a NASA facilitated lessons learned conference to allow providers to come forward and share lessons learned on their own accord to facilitate success of United States, human space flight. I think that is fantastic. Lessons learned conference. Yeah, again, that is a function of a safety information system. You could argue it's actually a function of the SMS, safety management system. One is learning from experience or sharing experience. So yeah, that is a critical function. So I suppose there's an underlying question here. What does the safety management system, safety information system, look like for the program, and particularly anomaly resolution or on orbit anomaly resolution? Because that's not really been talked about so far. It's kind of been hinted at, but not really explicitly addressed. And it might be in the next few sections that that's explicitly dealt with. But it's just interesting. And again, you could use STPA to help design that control structure and how the information should flow. And again, it should be resisted. It shouldn't just, hang on. It should be resisted if this turns into an annual conference that just shares loads of information that's not necessarily that relevant to the program stakeholders. And again, they don't have the time or headspace or budget resource to actually get involved and attend from it. I've seen it in a lot of organizations over the years where they just expect that their employees will find time to do this kind of non-priority activity. So unless they have time allocated for this kind of stuff and forced down from the top, people are just not necessarily going to get involved. There'll be those that are doing it out of the kindness of their hearts, and there'll be those that are trying to, get out of doing some work, or there'll be those that are probably older generation that are heading towards retirement, and they just need to give them something to do before they retire. And again, that's not a helpful for the control structure model. We need to get the right people involved and supported and resourced to be able to do that. So yeah, again, that's maybe there's a sub requirement there for making sure people are resourced and are given the priority to go and do that. Okay, so NASA should facilitate a conference to encourage sharing of information for potential or known issues, anomalies, experiences that may be common across providers. Just a point about this. The issues I've discussed in these live streams, they are common across all complex projects. In my experience across many projects, they are common issues. And STAMP, STPA, and CAST actually tries to help and solve those problems. And so I would recommend, perhaps, if you want, I'm happy to come and do a presentation maybe on this topic. The live stream workshop that I'm going to run. If the stakeholder for this recommendation would like, I'd be happy to run that internally to NASA and the stakeholders to discuss this particular topic and the issues I've identified using STAMP, STPA, or CAST. The stuff I've done with the European Space Agency, I'm anticipating we're going to publish some more specific detail about that in the coming months. And that will obviously feed into this, or should feed into this. Hopefully the stakeholders that go to this new conference will be like, hey, have you heard about these crazy Europeans at the ESA and the UK and Italy doing stamp on the Mars sample return mission? Maybe we should get them to come to our conference and tell us what they've done and how it worked and what challenges they had and how they overcome them and what benefits they got. So yeah, happy to do that. Let me know, and me and Ricardo could come and do that, certainly. This would be the providers sharing the information that they deem valuable, credible, worthwhile of their own accord. NASA would host the conference but would not be presenting. NASA would keep and track to inform future providers. NASA should seek to alleviate proprietary information concerns regarding systemic issues across multiple vehicle providers. The barrier to entry will be those providers who are on contract with NASA. Fantastic. If NASA would like to give my company a contract, I can certainly get involved and help with that. Right, fantastic. So it's 19:25 local time. So we've been at it for almost 90 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull stumps there, and then we can pick this up again tomorrow. And this will be section 522, so authority. And then we've got another sort of 10, 11 pages. Well, no, more than that, 15 pages. And then this section 5 is done. So there we go, fantastic. If you'd like to stick any comments in the chat or any questions, if you'd like any compliments or commiserations, that'd be fantastic. Otherwise, I will see you on the next live stream, which is the same time tomorrow, 1800 UTC +1. And we'll see you then. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good evening. Good night.